All right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started here. I'll just start with introductions and kind of who I am. So my name is Shannon Burlingame. I am a senior admissions counselor at PLU. I've been an admissions counselor at PLU for about 3 years now, and typically work with students from Northwest Washington, and some few other places along throughout the years. I'm also an alum from PLU as well, so I do remember my days as a student. I studied Hispanic studies and sociology, and I also studied abroad a few times. So that's really kind of why I chose PLU as a student, was their global education and study abroad opportunities. But tonight I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about college application process and kind of what you can expect to what colleges are looking for. Are you turning in the right things that they need, or what are you going to need to apply to that dream school of yours? So this is how to land in the yes pile, kind of some tips and tricks of what you can do to help stand out for your application. So let's go ahead and dive right in. I do want to remind you all that this is being recorded as well. So after tonight, if you miss anything or you need to write something back down, look out for a recording of this on our YouTube channel. You'll be able to go back and take notes, do whatever you need, as well as our other Suit Up for Senior Year sessions as well. So be sure to check those out too. So let's dive on in. So for what typical university requirements are, we like to use the acronym TREAT, usually because it's a treat for us admissions counselors to read your application. These are what most schools are going to require, but there's always an exception to every rule, so it's going to differ just a little bit. So absolutely check with each school that you are looking to apply to make sure that you are getting in all the necessary components for that. So we're going to go over transcripts this evening. Our letters of recommendation. E is for essay. I know that's always the scary part for students, so I'll give you some tips with that. Application, kind of what that looks like, and there's different types too, deadlines, all of that, and then test scores. That's always a question as well for students. So let's dive in. So T is for transcript. Most colleges are going to need a transcript, right? We're going to want to see what classes you're taking, how you're doing in those courses. That first bullet on there is grade trends, right? So we're going to want to see like how you're doing in those courses. Some students that apply to PLU or to other universities, perhaps they was kind of a rough transition into high school to where they didn't do the best GPA right out of the gate, but they kind of figured it out in senior year. They're doing well. So I know sometimes that happens, and students are always worried, like, oh no, like I didn't do that great sophomore year or freshman year. Like, is that going to hurt my chances getting into college? And what I like to tell those students is that no, as long as we see that improvement and that by senior year, you're figuring out, you're doing well, that class that maybe you didn't do so hot in 2-3 years ago, that is totally fine. But we do like to see that, yes, you kind of advocated for yourself and found the resources that you need to be successful as a student. So as long as you're able to kind of pick up that trend, then perfect. That's great. That's what we like to see. We also look at the rigor of your coursework too. So are you taking those honors courses or AP classes or IB classes? Are you doing running start? Kind of all of those extra things that you can be doing throughout your high school career. Some colleges as well, including PLU, might weight your GPA. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. This is one of the bullets later on the list there. But if you are taking some of those courses, a lot of colleges will actually do a weighted GPA for you. So a weighted versus unweighted GPA. A weighted GPA is a GPA that's boosted up a little bit. So if you are one of those students that you have taken an honors class or two, let's say you got a B+ in that class, When a university like PLU that weights GPAs, we see that class will actually give you a boost for that and give you maybe an A- in that class. So it's a little bit of a bump to your GPA, recognizing that, yeah, you are taking rigorous coursework. So we want to honor that for you. And we know that an honors class or an AP class is going to be a little bit more challenging than just a regular course. So that's why we give you a weighted GPA, a little boost. So definitely look at kind of the rigor of your coursework that you have taken, or maybe if you are a junior or sophomore, if you're able to take some of those courses in future years, then it's definitely a good decision to do so if you're able to. We also look at the senior course selection as well. So on the application part, there is a section for you to put what your current classes are as a senior. We do look at, are you still continuing to challenge yourself? Are you still taking, core academic classes? Are you taking maybe a math class or a science class your senior year? That's going to help you as well to be a little bit more competitive versus someone who's taking like PE 4 classes a day, right? So we want to see that you're still pushing yourself academically, even as a senior, to make yourself a little bit more competitive. But I really want to stress the importance of your junior year, that 4th bullet point there, because most cases, the junior year is going to be the last that we see on your transcript, right? So typically you're going to apply to college fall your senior year before the semester has ended. So your senior grades are not going to be on that transcript yet. So really the last grades that we're going to see on there is your junior year grades. So it is super important to do the absolute best that you can your junior year to really kind of bump up that GPA as much as you can before you apply to colleges. That being said, let's say, yes, you've been doing okay throughout high school, but maybe your GPA isn't as high as you would like it. You can absolutely still ask those colleges that you're applying to if you can submit a mid-year report your senior year, and perhaps either get more scholarships or a reevaluation for admission. Many colleges will do that, so PLU included. Let's say you apply in October, your senior year grades have not been out yet, and maybe you're kind of on the fence of being admitted or not. You can submit a new transcript once your senior grades have been released, so that those senior grades are also on your transcript as well, and hopefully boost that GPA, get you that admissions decision that you're waiting for, or perhaps boost your scholarships too. So keep that in mind, that if you're a senior and you'd like to kind of boost your GPA a bit, it's always worth an ask to see if you can submit a new transcript as well. So weighted and unweighted GPA, touched on that a bit. And then self-report or official transcript. What do you need to apply? Typically, most schools are going to ask you for an official transcript. Some schools are going to accept a self-submitted transcript, but eventually we're still going to need that official transcript directly from your school. So an official transcript is usually requested at the registrar's office in your high school. You go to the office and you say, hey, I would like to apply to PLU or whatever school that you're applying to, and have them submit a transcript. So typically your high school will submit the transcript for you directly to that school. Typically you don't have to do anything to do that, but sometimes I know that it can be a little wonky, or maybe it might take a little while. So sometimes you're also able to submit a self-reported transcript as well, typically just for admissions purposes. And then eventually, if you do decide to enroll in that school, we're going to ask for that official transcript anyways. So it's best to get the official one, but ask if you're able to do the self-reported one. Never hurts to ask. So that is transcript, my friends. Ours for recommendation. A lot of schools are going to require a letter of recommendation, PLU included. Some do not though, so absolutely check whether it's needed or not. So if they are required, ask how many. because some require more than one. So for example, PLU, we only require one, but we'll still accept up to 3. So if you want to submit 3 letters of recommendation, go for it. But only one is required, but that might change at other schools as well. So other schools might require that you submit more than one. So absolutely ask at every school that you're looking to apply to. And then do we ask for, if colleges ask for a specific type of recommendation? We don't typically, again, it might change on each college, but typically we're looking for a letter of recommendation from like an academic subject, right? So like English, math, science, those kind of teachers. However, let's say if you are applying for like a music program or something, maybe a choir teacher might be a really good recommendation for that. So it kind of depends on the type of program that you're applying to as well. But typically we like to see someone from like a teacher or a counselor, someone that knows you academically in the classroom that can really speak on your behalf and say like, hey, yeah, Tommy is a really excellent student. They'd be a great fit for your school. So those are typically the types of letters of recommendations or the recommenders that we are looking for. But think about who you should ask for, right? So that's kind of tying back into that. If you are applying to a music program, would it make more sense to have like a choir teacher versus an English teacher to submit your letter of recommendation? That kind of thing. Or I just had a question earlier today. If you perhaps are a Running Start student and maybe you don't know your teachers very well, are there other options as well? Typically there are. So I would check with that specific school that you're applying to and see what those are, because again, that might differ for each university. But you want to give them a lot of time too, right? So let's say I ask my teacher, Miss Thompson, whoever, hey, pretty please, can you write me a letter? I want to give them at least 2 weeks to turn that letter in. Give them as much time as you can, at least ahead of time, because most likely if they're your favorite teacher, they're probably going to be someone else's favorite teacher as well, just so that they have enough time to get in your letter. What am I trying to say? And like a good amount of time, right? So you wouldn't want to ask them like the day before it's due to turn in, right? You want to ask them maybe like 2 or 3 weeks before you want it turned in. And also absolutely thank your recommender. Thank them a lot. Starbucks gift cards are always a great idea. But they're typically really well-written letters about their students and how much they love you and how great of a student you are, right? So typically you're not going to see this letter of recommendation. Usually teachers send it directly to the school, or they'll upload it to their whatever the application platform is directly. So you typically as a student are not going to see this letter of recommendation. But they usually just compliment you through the roof. So absolutely thank them as much as you can for putting that extra effort for you. E is for essay. I know this is always the scary part for a lot of students, turning in that essay and having to write about themselves when we a lot of times don't get a lot of practice talking about ourselves or writing about ourselves, right? Or what's a good essay topic to even write about, all of that stuff. So here are some tips for the essay, but I do know that we have a whole webinar within this series about tips and tricks for writing the college essay. So be on the lookout for that. Absolutely check out our website or our YouTube channel for that recording as well, because it's got a lot of good tips in it too. But my favorites are that you are in full control. So keep that in mind. This is that one part of your essay that you are in complete control of, right? So your transcript, your grades, what's done is done. You can't really change that grade from sophomore year, right? What's done is done. Your letter of recommendation, someone else is writing that for you, so you don't really have control of that either. But your essay, you have complete control of this before you hit that submit button, right? So you can edit as many times as you want. You can switch it up. So keep that in mind. You are in control of your essay. So put your absolute best effort forward. One thing as a counselor, because I do read admissions essays, one thing to keep in mind that really helps a essay stand out is your voice. So that's really kind of what I'm looking for is who's this person behind this transcript or behind this application, right? Like who is the person? So how you kind of get to know that person is having that voice, having your voice come through your writing. So if you've taken any creative writing courses, great. Use whatever you've learned in those courses, but have your voice come through your writing. Yeah, it's not one of the tips on here. Great. So, and don't be afraid to like get creative too. So we have had students, and again, you don't have to do this, but we've had students submit like their essays in a form of like a poem or a song or like just very creative. Again, if you are not like that, I would not be able to write a song. So that's totally fine. You do not have to. But just to give you an example, like it is okay to get creative with your essay and have some fun with it too, right? Because that's again showing your personality and showing your voice that have come through. So for that third bullet point, think of a characteristic about yourself you really want the college to know and let it be the highlight, right? So if you are really quirky or if you are really like, I don't know, let's say you're a really clumsy person, that's okay to have that come through and be that highlight. Like, yeah, I'm really clumsy and look how amazing of a person I am. Or if you are excellent at like Rubik's cubes or something, right? Cool. Let that be the highlight of your essay. And how can you kind of tie, maybe your passion for Rubik's cubes to what you'd like to do in college or your goals or your future, kind of all of that stuff too. That's what we like to see as well. But we'd like to get to know you, right? So if there's some like quirk or characteristic or some like unique hobby that you have, like absolutely tie that in, because again, that's showing your personality and who you are. So that's what we like to see. Next on the list is that grammar, punctuation, spelling, flow, all of that stuff is still absolutely matters. So edit as much as you can. Have someone read your essay, have maybe 2 or 3 people read your essay, and switch things around as much as you need to. Because again, you have full control of this. So make sure that it is your absolute best work before you hit that submit button. But keep in mind, this is your application is your first impression to the university, right? So you want to make sure that your first impression has like things spelt correctly and like the end of your sentences have punctuation, capital letters, right? All of these things. As a senior in high school, I know that you all are probably excellent at these. So, show how great you are. This is kind of your time to shine. And don't repeat things that are already in your application elsewhere. So I know our essay webinar touches on this a little bit as well, but there's going to be another part of the application that is your activities section. So that's the section where you get to say, hey, I was president of Key Club and I was on the tennis team and I did all these other things. Great, that's awesome. So put all of that there in the activities section and talk about something completely different in your essay, right? Because I'm already going to read all about that in a different section of the application. So you don't have to tell me twice, right? So pick something completely different that you want to talk about. And then we do have a question here about what do you mean about voice, if we can go more into detail. So for example, like how I am talking right now, I would say it would be a little bit more casual, I'd say, right? Like I don't use big giant words. So if I were to write an essay and I'm using like big fancy words, that's not really my voice coming through at all, because that's not how I talk. So the way that your essay should read should sound as if you were talking it. That's kind of what I mean about like your voice, right? So when you read your essay, or like you have a friend read your essay, right? They can say, oh yeah, this sounds like you. Right? Or if they like read your essay and they're like, where is this from? Then maybe your essay doesn't have as much as your voice coming through. So that's kind of what I mean by have your voice come through is, does your essay sound like you wrote it? If you were talking to your friend or to whoever, does that kind of correlate to your essay, right? Is that similar at least to how you sound and talk, kind of what words you would use? Or let's say if you're a humorous person and you're like telling jokes all the time, do you have that come through in your writing as well? So just keep that in mind of having your voice come through and like your ideas and all of that too. So I hope that answers your question there, Cindy. Perfect. And then A is for application, most important part, right? You do have to apply. And there's a few different platforms to do so here. So I'm going to skip down to the third point. I'll come back, I promise. So there's a few different ways to apply to different colleges. So there's common application, coalition application. There's all these other like platforms to apply to colleges, right? So those are also kind of confusing in themselves. Like, where is this college? Where do I apply to? So if you know where you'd like to apply, then look to see where you can. So for example, PLU, our application is going to be on the common application. What these application websites are essentially is, let's say you want to apply to 5 different high schools. Instead of going to 5 different colleges, you want to apply to 5 different colleges. And instead of going to 5 different websites, you go to one of these websites, common application, coalition application, whatever. You put in all your application materials, right? Your transcript, you put in your essay, your letters of recommendation, all that good stuff. And then you hit submit, and then you add what schools that you want to have it sent to before you hit that submit button. So it's going to save you a lot of time, right? So instead of putting the same information into 5 different websites, you just put it into the one and send it to whatever schools that you're looking for. So that's going to save you a ton of time. Some schools like PLU, that's the only way to apply. So for us, the only way to apply to PLU is through the common app and through the common application. So check with which school that you'd like to apply to, and ask them, how do I apply? Where's your application? Sometimes schools are going to have an application on their website and one of these application websites as well. So always great question to ask to make sure that, yes, you're going to the right spot. Okay, jumping back up to that first bullet there. How many schools should you apply to? I know some students, they get nervous that they might not get into anything. So then they apply to like 10 or 15 schools just in case they don't get into, their top 5 schools or whatever. And honestly, that's just making it a little bit harder on yourself, because let's say you get into all 10 or 15 schools. Now, how do you decide between 10 or 15 schools, right? So it's best to kind of narrow your list down a little bit. Typically, we recommend, 3 to 5, so that you have some options, but you're not like totally overwhelming yourself. So that's typically what we suggest. Apply to like 3 to 5, right? Definitely have one school in there that's kind of a what's it called? Like a goal school, like kind of like a little bit higher out of your reach. You're not sure whether you might get in or not, but hey, apply, see what happens. One that, yeah, you're pretty sure that you'll get in, and then maybe another one that's kind of like your backup school, right? So that's kind of the range that you want to look for while you're applying to schools. If you are applying to like 10 or 15, again, you're just going to make it a little bit harder for you later on down the road when you have to make that decision. So, and then how much does it cost to apply? This, again, is largely going to depend on each school. Some schools, like PLU, we actually have a free application, so the cost is zero. So some schools are going to be free. Some schools, they might have a fee up, $50, $75. So again, if you're applying to 10 schools, that can add up pretty quickly. So check with your admissions counselor at whatever school you're looking to apply to, and see what their fee actually is. But it's definitely can be a wide range, 70 up to $75, $80 sometimes. So definitely helps to check. But again, some schools are going to be free, so you never know. And then there's all these things: rolling admission, early action, early decision, one date. What do these even mean? So for example, rolling admission is going to be where the college does not have a set deadline. So for example, PLU has rolling admission. We do not have a set deadline of you have to apply by this date or you can't, right? So we're always accepting applications throughout the year. That's kind of what rolling admission is essentially no deadline. However, just because there's not a date that's saying you have to apply by this, I would absolutely not suggest waiting until the last minute to apply. Absolutely continue to apply. Your fall semester, senior year, you're going to save yourself a lot of stress. Even if the deadline, or even if there is no deadline, kind of create that one for yourself, to get your application in. Even though, so for PLU, for example, we don't have a application deadline, but some of our scholarships are going to have deadlines. So that's where it really kind of helps out, or why it's important for you to apply sooner rather than later, even for schools that have rolling admission, because sometimes their scholarships are going to have deadlines where the application doesn't. Early action, right? You're going to want to apply beforehand. Early decision, those are like if you get into a school, you are committed to that school essentially. So those are, again, it's always going to differ from each college that you apply to. So absolutely ask them, what's your decision date, or what's your application deadline? Are you early action or early decision? How does all that work? So absolutely check with each school that you're applying to. And again, on the actual application, this is your first impression to the college. So make sure it is a good first impression. So your grammar, punctuation, spelling, all that good stuff is still matters, even on just the regular application part. Again, for application. So there's going to be different parts of the application, right? We're going to ask for just your regular information of name, address, contact, how do we find you, all of that good stuff. And then there's also going to be typically an activity section or like a resume section. So what we're looking for there in that activity section is really a little bit of everything. So within that, absolutely include any like after school activities that you've been involved in. So clubs, like student government, sports that you might have been involved in, theater productions, community service, leadership, retreats, music, art, everything. Put all of that on there. Whether you have been in that, throughout your whole time in high school, or maybe just 1 year, or let's say if it was theater, maybe it was a production that was only like 3 weeks. That's totally fine. Put that on there. I always tell students, put absolutely everything, and then let us admissions counselors decide whether it's important or not, right? So this is your time to brag. So brag, right? School activities count, non-school activities count as well. So if you're in any like organizations outside of school, like Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, if you're involved with your church at all, if you are working after school, right, you have an employment, you're doing community service, or let's say you have a family responsibility, that counts, right? Let's say you're taking care of siblings after school or taking care of a family member, that counts. Put that on your application, because that shows us that you are a responsible individual. and able to show up, right? So absolutely put all that stuff down, mission trips, travel, anything with like dance and all of that. Anything outside of school absolutely counts as well. Okay, so I have a question here about a letter of recommendation. I'm going to get back to it towards the end. I promise you I'll come back to your question. Oops, there we go. So yeah, all of your outside activities as well. And then don't sell yourself short, right? So again, this is your bragging sheet. So again, if you were part of something that maybe only lasted 3 weeks and you're like, that doesn't count. Yes, it absolutely does. Stick that on there. For us, it shows us that, you've done something outside of your, like, what is just the basic requirements of attending classes in school. Also on there, put for how long, for like how many years, right? Have you been in a club like all 4 years of high school? Great. For us, that shows that you're committed to that something. So let's say even if you're just a regular club member, you have not had any like officer roles or anything, that's okay. That still counts. Put that on there because again, that shows that you're committed to that section. And then if you have had any leadership positions, right? So let's say you were secretary or vice president or president of a club or something, put that on there because that distinguishes you from, a club member versus a club officer, or that shows that you've had some leadership in that area as well. So again, this is your bragging sheet. So absolutely brag as much as you can. And then this is kind of a funky one, your test scores, our second T, because this is largely going to depend on each school. So some schools are going to be test optional, some might not be, but for the most part, I'd say at this point, a lot of schools are still test optional, but it really depends on how test optional they really are. So for PLU, we are totally test optional. Last year, I want to say it was like 85% of our students applied test optional. So it really made no difference with their admissions decision, whether they had a test score or not. It really doesn't affect their scholarships at all either. So for us, we are completely totally test optional. If you'd like to send your scores, absolutely, you're more than welcome. We will check them out for you. If you don't want to send them in, again, totally fine. It's not going to hurt you in any way. But some schools do not have, the same policies that we do. So it's definitely worth asking each school that you're applying to, are you test optional and what does that mean for you? What does that mean for scholarship wise as well? So ask the schools that you're looking at and kind of what are the rules around that. If you do want to take test scores, when should you take them? You typically take them, I want to say in your junior year, and then you get your test scores your senior year, but you're also welcome to take them, your senior year as well. If you think that, you are more experienced and have more knowledge, yeah, you're welcome to take them again. Typically students do take, or they can take them more than once. I remember as I was a high school student, I did take the SATs more than once. Sometimes it helps just because you've taken it once. First time, you might be super nervous and like, oh, you have no idea what these questions are even asking. Second time, hopefully you might be a little bit less nervous and you have kind of an idea of what to expect going into it. But just because you've taken something more than once doesn't mean that you'll always get a better test score, and that's okay. So absolutely take them more than once if you can. And then a lot of schools will super score as well. So let's say your first time that you took the SATs or ACTs, you actually got a higher score than you did the second time. So a super score is where the school always takes like your highest score or puts them together to create a higher score for you. So that's what a super score is. Again, absolutely check with your school and kind of what their policies are surrounding test scores and kind of what all of these mean, whether you should whether you absolutely need to take these exams, or if you're the type of person where you like totally freeze up on tests, that's okay. And if you would rather apply test optional, totally fine. So I believe that is our last bullet here. So I'm going to head back to that question we had. So question for our attendee was that they have already submitted 2 different letters of recommendations. Both of them were handed to them as printed copies. How would they submit them for their application? So 1, excellent, congrats to you, Ari, asking for your letters of recommendation. Great job. 2nd, I would, if I were you, scan them, take a picture, send them to your admissions counselor at the schools that you're looking to apply to. So for PLU, we will also accept a emailed copy. But again, it might change at different schools as well. So if that's the case at other schools, they might have to receive them directly from the recommenders, where you might have to go back and again, thank you so much for my letter of recommendation. Can you please email it to this email, right? So check with the schools that you are looking to apply to. Again, if you're local and applying to PLU, you might be able to just hand them in by hand, but it's going to change for each school as well. So, and our final tips for the evening is that you can get in, really. Less than 100 colleges in the US are highly selective, which means less than 25% get in. So again, less than 100 colleges are that selective. So most likely you can get in. So for PLU, for example, our acceptance rate, I want to say is about 75, 80%. So that is just us. Again, it's going to change depending on what school that you are applying to, but not many schools are super, super selective to where less than 25% get in. So you can, I promise. But express interest as well. So as you're going to college fairs, right, and admissions counselors are asking for you to like, hey, fill out this form. Hey, put your email in or whatever, right? That's showing us that you are interested in our college. So we can invite you to things like this or campus events or like cool student overnight stuff or lots of cool stuff, right? So express interest in whatever schools that you are interested in so that we know you are interested as well and can continue to invite you to all the cool, fun things that really kind of help you in your college decision as well. So the more that you get kind of acquainted with the schools that you're interested in, the more things that you attend from their on their campus, right? You get better acquainted with their campus and their students, professors, and you have a better idea kind of what you would expect from that school. So then it's easier for you to make that college decision when that time comes. So absolutely express interest and get all the info from all of them that you can. Use the additional information section or the community disruption section on the Common App as well. So there is a section after you've added all of your like contact info and transcript and your essay and all of that. There is a section at the end that says, you know, additional information or community disruption, whatever it's called. Use that paragraph, right? Maybe if you are a student that maybe your first year of high school was a little rough and you're kind of worried about your grades, use that section and say, you know, hey, what was going on? You know, maybe there was a family emergency or something, right? Like life happens. That's totally fine. Let us know though, so that we can kind of take that into account as we're reviewing your application. So PLU, for example, we do a holistic review of an application. So having that more information for us definitely helps us in terms of just kind of getting a better picture of who you are as a student and having that background. So use that section. Take your time, right? Again, you have control over your essay. So absolutely take your time on your essay. Make sure that there aren't any like spelling, grammar errors, all of that, right? This is your first impression to the university. So make sure it's a good one. And keep in mind, you're in charge. You are the one hitting the submit button. So make sure that this is your best efforts that are going forward. And most schools, the last one, most schools, there is an actual person reading your application. So at PLU, I would be your person reading your application if you are in Northwest Washington. At other schools, you will also have a person like me that is reading your application. So keep that in mind, that there is an actual like person, human behind the application that you're submitting it to. So if there is something that you would like a person to keep into account, then put that on your application and we will read that. So just keep that in mind as you're applying to colleges, that hopefully that makes it a little bit less scary, that you're not submitting it to some giant whatever, you're submitting it to a person that will actually read it for you. So those are my final tips and tricks for you. We do have a few minutes left, so if there's any questions, feel free to stick that in the Q&A. We do have a question that someone, they had missed some previous ones and asking where we can watch, where they can watch them. You all can watch them on the PLU YouTube channel for Office of Admission. We'll have a Suit Up for Senior Year there, little playlist, I guess. So absolutely check those out. There's some really great other webinars done as well. Some good tips on essays and things like that. So check that out for you. Any other questions, feel free to stick them in the Q&A. So Leslie is asking, can a previous employer write a letter of recommendation, or can someone we volunteered for write a letter of recommendation? Yes and yes. So typically someone that we'd like to see from an academic perspective, teacher, counselor, but if that's not really doable for you, that's not really an option, then yeah, we'll absolutely take someone from an employer or someone that you volunteered for, right? For us, that's still going to show, they're still going to be able to talk on your behalf of like being consistent and committed, and they'll still be able to talk on like your work ethic and things like that, right? They're still going to be able to talk on like who you are as a person. So yes, those would absolutely count. Any others? Yeah, and then at each school, just as a reminder, each school that you apply to, you do have an admissions counselor. So you have like your go-to person. So if you do have any questions about applications or whatever at any school, look up online, like find your admissions counselor. Who is my admissions counselor? Because you have one assigned to you at every college. And then, so Brielle is asking if you have any application tips being considered for the presidential scholarship. Great question. Yes, and I believe we have another upcoming webinar that will talk about this as we get closer to the application date. So keep on the lookout for that webinar as it comes up. But my tips for the presidential scholarship, for those that don't know, the presidential scholarship at PLU is a $34,000 scholarship up to full tuition, and it is a separate application. So keep that in mind. And the deadline for it is December 1st. So again, that's why it's so important to get your application in ahead of time in the fall of your senior year, so that you have your application in for PLU or your college and that presidential scholarship. So other schools typically have a similar scholarship as well. But my tips are for you is that this is going to be a leadership scholarship. So that's why it's really important on that additional application to really write out what are your extra duties that you have done and kind of what that entails. So for example, let's say you were president of Key Club, right? Cool. So instead of you'll put president of Key Club, and then underneath, write what that means. Like, what did you do? What events did you put on? How many hours a week? Like, what does that mean, right? What did you do? So kind of fill out all of that application as much as you can. and really highlight your leadership for it. There is also an essay component to that application as well. We don't know the topic of the essay prompt yet, but I am going to tell you there's probably going to be a few themes within that essay prompt. Any way that you can within that essay to kind of spice it up a little bit and stand out. Something other than like your typical 5-paragraph essay where it's like introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and then sandwich with conclusion, right? Any way that you're kind of able to bust out of that format a little bit is going to show a little bit more creativity and help you stand out a little bit more than just the regular 5-paragraph essay. So those are my tips for that. But again, keep an eye out for that webinar coming up as well, because they'll have a lot more tips for that too. And that's a December 1st deadline. So that is a scholarship for the deadline. Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, any others? All right, perfect. And then, yep, thank you, Jordan. So Jordan is on our back end this evening. So check in the chat. She's put that link for Suit Up webinars, so you can check that out. And then the scholarships one will be October 4th. So they'll have a lot more stuff for you, that one. All righty. Any other questions that you are dying to know for the evening? Going once, going twice. All right, cool. Well, thank you all for attending this evening. I really appreciate your time. And again, look out for those webinars. One last question: if your club that you were an officer, but the club shut down, can you place it on admissions? Ooh, great question. Yes, so this has happened through COVID a lot, where you were part of a club, COVID happened, and then the club like wasn't active doing anything. Can you still put it down? Yes, absolutely, that still counts. So again, same thing, put that down, that you participated in this club, you would put what you did in that club. Yeah, absolutely still counts. Yep, because you did it. Yeah, great question. Awesome. Great. Well, thank you, folks. Thanks for tuning in. And again, look out for those webinars coming up as well, and our YouTube channel. So thank you much. Have a good evening.